Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Fredericks of the John Fredericks Radio Network, and thanks for joining us today. This is a special report. We're going to interrupt the Dennis Prager Show for a few moments across the John Fredericks Radio Network, across Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. Thanks for being with us. As always, a special guest we have, VA Secretary Rob Wilkie is going to be joining us in a moment. He's traveling through the Commonwealth, and I love having the Secretary on because back in the Obama days, all we did week after week after week was have report after report after report of disasters in the VA hospital system, almost on a weekly basis, people dying, couldn't get care, papers being manipulated, wait lists being changed, lies being done in the computer, nobody could get fired, incompetence was just abound, and our vets were suffering. The Trump administration and Secretary Wilkie has turned that around in a 3.5-year period. It's been an amazing metamorphosis, and he's joining us now. Mr. Secretary, always great to have you, sir. Secretary Rob Wilkie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Always appreciate it.
Mr. Secretary, you're traveling through our area. Tell us some of the top things that you're working on now, and just an overall update on the VA system in Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic, sir.
Sure, John. I'm thanking people. I'm thanking the VA employees in Hampton, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, not just for taking care of veterans, but for opening themselves and our doors up to non-VA patients. Our people have been in 200 homes in the Commonwealth. We have offered help to nursing homes, state veterans homes in Virginia. And I wanted to thank those folks because I'll be honest with you, we don't get a lot of thanks from the news media. And our ability to help the wider population, I think, is a testament to how far this department's come under the leadership of the president. We have an all-time high satisfaction rate. We set a record last year for the highest number of appointments we've ever had. And we went from, in the Obama administration, the worst place in government to work, 17 out of 17, to last year we were number 6 and still rising. So it's a testament to how much the president has paid attention to us and how much he's allowed us to reform what was a moribund institution. You know, the last administration was lucky if they hit 52% approval for their medical care. So it's been a wonderful thing to watch.
Well, I tell you what, Mr. Secretary, it's very easy for the media to criticize. That's what they do in the Trump administration. I don't want to get into politics here because you serve on the administration side, but I mean, we haven't heard a single peep in this area out of the fake news about the progress you've made. The fact that you went from worst to number 6, working conditions. I mean, we used to get, I got to tell you, Mr. Secretary, we would get people on a show, and I said this at the beginning, every week in Virginia and around the Mid-Atlantic, North Carolina, Maryland, just saying what a disaster it was. They couldn't, nobody would pick up the phone. People were on waiting lists for 6 months. Job morale in the entire VA hospital system, care system was a complete disaster. And look, This is another promise the president made, promise that he kept, and the vice president, both of them, came to Virginia during the campaign, sir, on multiple occasions and said, you elect me, we will fix this. And they did. And it goes to show you, everybody says, oh, you can't change government. You just can't change it. It's too big. You can't change it. You guys were able to do that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you about the Hampton VA, Hampton, Virginia, for those listeners who aren't in the Hampton Roads area. Now, I sang as a little boy in the school choir at the Hampton VA chapel. That was my first experience with the VA hospital in the early 1970s. And in the last administration, you're absolutely right. They had a 6-month at a minimum wait time just for primary care. Well, under this administration, it's down to 15 days, which is better than anything you can get in the private sector. So huge advancement has been made. But I'll talk about a couple of things. One,
Go ahead,
it's true. It's true. The president has allowed me to present the two largest budgets in the history of the department. This last one was $240 billion.
Mm-hmm.
But what the other thing he's allowed me to do, he's allowed me to put in place people in leadership. All of them have extensive military experience. We have all served. And why is that important? Because we understand the culture and we speak the language. And VA is no longer a place where an administration can give a job to somebody so that a fancy title can go on a resume. And I think that part of it has made a tremendous difference. And our veterans respond. They're responding. They're voting with their feet. And it's a wonderful thing to see. And it has a lot more to do than just simple budgets.
So the motivation factor, I want to get to that because you're right. And by the way, this is a special edition of the John Fredericks Radio Network across all of our affiliates in Virginia. Thanks for being with us. We've interrupted the Dennis Prager Show. He'll be back with you at top of the hour for a special report. We are with we are with Veterans Administration Secretary Rob Wilkie. Secretary Wilkie, you mentioned something I want to get back to because you have the care issue that's been remedied, but then you had the morale issue. And
right.
The VA was rated in government out of 17 agencies as number 17 worst place to work for years. I mean, it was just matter of fact you were going to get 17. Right. In 3 years, you've taken that to 6. So how did you get? I get the care issues in the budget, but how did you get up the people's morale?
Well, first of all, it's getting in people who understand veterans in the leadership. It's also doing something that the last crowd did not do, and that is take up for the workers who are on the front lines. But there's another part, and you and I have talked about this before. We've relieved over 8,000 employees for not doing their jobs, and those are employees at the highest level to the custodial level. And what does that do? It sends a message through the department that people will be held accountable, that good workers are not going to be required to carry people who don't do their jobs. And the other thing that we've done, we've implemented what those of us who are in the Air Force call high reliability organization. We actually, under this president, give people a say in how their sections are run. So what does that mean? It means that every day, if you're in sterile processing, or if you're in custodial, or if you're in surgical, you meet. You talk about what goes on the day before, what went on the day before. Not necessarily what went right, but what went wrong. And people are allowed to be heard. I think this is something that we've learned from the president. I certainly have not spent the kind of time that he has in the private sector. But those are private sector lessons that say we're not going to run this from some far-off office in D.C. We're going to give people the authority to make changes, to do the job that they think needs to be done. And that has had a tremendous effect throughout VA. People are now invested in the organization. Right.
Well, bringing some of those private sector principles into government, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think President Trump got elected in the first place. But you know what's interesting, just as an aside, and we're with VA Secretary Rob Wilkie, you know what's interesting, Mr. Secretary, is during the last campaign, the VA was it was a campaign issue, right?
Yeah.
I remember talking about it with various candidates running for Congress or Senate that I would get on my show, and of course we covered it. But it was a campaign issue. The president came. It was his first trip to Virginia. He came to Norfolk, Virginia. I was there live with him, and he did his rally from a ship there. And it was he came another time to, I think, Regents University. Both times was centered on the VA. In the campaign now, we got 96 days to go. Even though we can't talk about the campaign in your position, we got 96 days to go. It isn't even mentioned. Nobody talks about the VA. Why?
Yeah. Well, I think from the media perspective, if there's no bad news, there's nothing for them to report. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they're going to give this president any credit for anything.
You think?
But that's what we have to do, and it's up to him to make sure that people hear that message. And I will say this, and you mentioned the campaign stops and the Tidewater. This was the first president to ever make veterans the centerpiece of his campaign, and then, of course, in his presidency. And you see that reflected in the transformation that has taken place. We've opened up the aperture on choice. We are allowing people to go get care where it's most convenient to them, not what's convenient to the department. We're about ready to launch, after decades of trying, the electronic health record, where we can now pull the records from the Department of Defense, and we have a complete picture of a veteran's health. And for my father's generation of Vietnam, we will finally, under this president, close probably the last of the circles left open, and we will provide the caregivers for Vietnam veterans, people like my mother, material and, if needed, financial support to take care of those Vietnam veterans who are having trouble with day-to-day living. So the promises have been kept, and VA is in a much, much better place than it was the day before the inauguration in 2017.
And thank you for looking after our forgotten era of Vietnam veterans that everybody forgot about, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah,
thank you for doing that.
Can I ask one vignette to that, and what formed my perspective on the world? My father was terribly wounded in the invasion of Cambodia. He came back after a year in an Army hospital, weighing about half of what he did when he went. But that's not the story. You are told as a child that something like that could happen when your father goes to war. But he was allowed to recover, and he went back to the 82nd Airborne Division. So he's a senior officer in the most decorated of all combat units in the armed forces. And he was not allowed to wear that red beret or that uniform off post. And that was the metaphor for Vietnam, that the country did not welcome people home. It did not appreciate the sacrifices that led to 56,000 deaths in Southeast Asia. So you are absolutely on target, and we're trying now, 45 years this year after the fall of Saigon, to finally get right. And this is one of the last things that we need to do.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being on the engine of this in the front end and putting our Vietnam vets front and center. And it's I grew up in that era, and so I remember it. And I was very lucky because I had a very low draft number. And I remember when I got it, my father telling me, "Well, better get ready to go because we don't have the resources to get you a deferment. So just forget baseball. You're just going to have to go." So I had a very low draft number. But then the war ended, and I didn't have to go. But that was a time that I kind of remember thinking about it, and what you just got to go to training, and you just do what the government tells you to do. That was the era back then. That was a generation. So, absolutely. But I want to thank you for all you've done and the tremendous success you've had, and by rolling up your sleeves and getting your people. And I didn't realize you said 8,000 people have been relieved of their duties in a 3-year period. I remember when we were fighting with Warner and Kane, our senators in Virginia, to vote for remember the VA Accountability Act? Remember that? And just giving you the opportunity to terminate people that were incompetent or didn't care. Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one of the president's principles, having been in the private sector, that the notion that you have a job for life
that you can't be removed is anathema to the whole American experience. And, certainly when it comes to our veterans, they deserve better. Are there hiccups? Certainly. Are there people we should have gotten rid of earlier? Of course. But the message is out that it's no longer a safe harbor just to accept a federal check, and that's the least that we can do for the 9.5 million veterans we take care of.
Mr. Secretary, final question. We're almost out of time. Between now and the end of the year, this is August, right? So you've got August, September, October, November, December, 5 months. What is the number one objective that Secretary Wilkie has in the next 5 months? Number one thing you want to get done, sir.
Can I give you two? I'll give you two. The first is to make sure that if this thing boomerangs back on us, that we are ready. We're stocking up on supplies. We're taking note of best practices. I mean, we were the only one to cut off our nursing homes from visitors. We have in our 134 nursing homes a total today of 9 patients with COVID, and most of those we brought in from state veterans homes. The other is one that's near and dear to your heart, and that's to put out the national roadmap on ending veteran suicide. A terrible trend that takes 20 veterans a day, most of them from Vietnam, and this is the first time we've had a national approach to this. It's been the president's number one clinical priority outside of taking on this epidemic. So those are the two things. Prepare in the event that it boomerangs. The second is to push ahead on suicide prevention. All
right, sir. Great objectives. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming to Virginia and thanking our hard-working VA.
And it was good to be back. It was good to be back at Hampton Roads.
All right, VA Secretary Rob Wilkie, special edition of the John Fredericks Show, now back to regular programming.